The desert wind came first. It slipped through the cracks of the wooden bar doors and carried with it the smell of sand and distant fire. Inside, the room was dim, lit only by a dying neon sign outside that flickered against the dusty bottles lined on the shelf. Every man who sat inside had the same look in his eyes, beaten, tired, waiting for something to happen. At the far end of the counter, he sat alone, shoulders broad, head bent, fingers wrapped around a glass he hadn't lifted in an hour. The drink was warm, untouched, its surface reflecting a scarred face that no one in the room really saw. His shirt was frayed at the cuffs, boots scuffed by years of hard labor. To most, he was just another man drifting through the wreckage of a forgotten town. But there was a weight in the way he carried himself, the kind of silence that filled a room more than words ever could. The jukebox in the corner played a song so faint it sounded like memory. He didn't hear it. He heard something else, the faint echo of boots pounding in dust, of shouted orders drowned in gunfire. He pressed his thumb against the rim of the glass, steadying his breathing, forcing the sound back where it belonged. The door slammed open. Wind rushed in, carrying with it a scatter of grit that stung the eyes of the men near the entrance. Boots followed, heavy, deliberate, claiming the floorboard like a challenge. A group of bikers spilled in, leather vests streaked with dust and chains rattling like warning bells. Their laughter was sharp, cutting through the stale air. The bartender didn't greet them. He simply lowered his gaze, polishing a glass that was already clean. And then she walked in. The room shifted when she appeared in the doorway. Tall, with dark hair pulled back beneath a bandana, leather jacket creased and sunburnt, rings flashing on every finger. Her eyes were knives, not wild, but calculated, cold, and steady. Everyone in the bar looked at her, and then looked away, because no one wanted to be caught staring at the woman who had more money than all of them combined, and more scars than most would ever survive. She didn't belong in this town, but she owned it all the same. Her boots carried her straight past the men who had already settled into their noise and beer. She went to the counter, close enough to him that the smell of engine oil and leather tangled with the smoke he hadn't exhaled. She didn't look at him at first, only order her drink with a voice that was low but absolute. The bartender moved fast. He kept his head down, tried to make himself invisible, tried to will her attention away from him. But the problem with silence that heavy is it draws eyes. She turned toward him, studying the way his hand trembled faintly against the glass. One of her men noticed it too. He leaned over, grinning with teeth that hadn't seen a dentist in years. "Look at this one," he said, loud enough for half the bar to hear. Hands shaking like a pup in the rain. Laughter followed, rough and mean. He didn't rise. He didn't move. His silence was his shield, but it made them bolder. Another man shoved his shoulder, just hard enough to make his glass tip and spill across the counter. Still, he didn't move. The billionaire biker woman's eyes narrowed. She didn't join in the laughter. She watched. The third shove came harder. This time, he staggered back a step. His shirt caught on the edge of a chair, fabric tearing down the front. The sound was sharp, like paper ripping in church silence. And then the room went still. The shirt opened enough to expose his chest, the ink carved deep into his skin. An eagle spread wide, globe and anchor beneath it, black as the night sky. The tattoo was faded by years, scarred at the edges, but it was unmistakable. The United States Marine Corps. Every sound in the bar died. Even the jukebox seemed to choke on its tune. The bikers who had been laughing froze mid-grin, their voices caught in their throats. No one moved because everyone knew what that tattoo meant. The woman's eyes fixed on it, her breath catching in the silence. For the first time since she had walked in, something shifted in her gaze, recognition, and something else that looked almost like respect.
He didn't speak. He didn't need to.
He just stood there, chest exposed, scars around the ink telling stories no one in that bar would ever dare ask. His silence was louder than any threat. Outside, the wind howled against the door. Inside, no one moved. The storm hadn't arrived yet, but everyone knew it was coming. The storm came without warning. One moment, the neon sign outside flickered in its half-dead glow, and the next it was swallowed by a curtain of dust so thick the windows turned black. The bar's power cut with a sigh, plunging the room into a strange half-darkness where only cigarette tips glowed and eyes reflected whatever light they could steal. The wind screamed. Boards rattled against their nails. Sand slithered under the cracks of the door and gathered on the floor like an invading tide. For a breath, no one spoke, listening to the fury outside. Then the laughter started again, low at first, from the men who didn't know how else to face silence. He sat back down slowly, tugging his torn shirt together, though the tattoo still burned visible through the rip. His eyes weren't on them. They were far away, somewhere between memory and storm. He saw sand, but not from this desert. He saw another horizon, dust lifting under helicopter blades, the sting of gunpowder in his nose. The storm outside was nothing compared to the storm inside his head. The woman stood, her drink untouched. She leaned against the bar with the kind of stillness that demanded respect, her eyes fixed not on the storm, not on her men, but on him. She had seen that tattoo before, on someone who never came back. Her brother. She remembered the way he used to laugh, the weight of his dog tags in her hand the day they told her he wasn't coming home. She said nothing, but her silence wasn't empty. It was heavy, watching, measuring. A crash broke the moment. One of her men kicked over a chair, muttering about being trapped in this godforsaken place until the storm passed. Another cursed and lit a match, the flame flickering wild against the sudden gusts. The room filled with tension as raw as the wind. He lifted his glass finally, drained it in one swallow, and stood. The bartender tried to warn him with his eyes, "Don't move, don't draw attention," but it was too late. His shadows stretched long across the floor as he headed for the back door, maybe toward the storm itself. He needed air, needed space, needed to breathe without the smell of leather and cheap whiskey pressing in on him. A hand caught his arm. One of the bikers, big, scarred, grinning with the same cruelty as before. "Where you think you're going, soldier boy?" He didn't answer. He only looked at the hand, then at the man, his eyes calm but carrying something dangerous beneath. The silence stretched until the woman's voice cut through. "Let him go." The words were quiet, almost casual, but they froze the room. The biker hesitated, then pulled his hand back like he'd touched fire. She hadn't raised her voice, but everyone there knew she didn't need to. He walked out into the storm. The wind hit him like a wall, tearing at his shirt, driving grit into his skin. He squinted into the blackness, each breath filled with dust. The world outside had vanished. No road, no horizon, just swirling chaos. He pulled his collar up, bracing himself, but instead of fighting it, he let the storm wrap around him. The roar of it was almost a comfort. It was loud enough to drown out the echoes in his head. Behind him, the door creaked open again. She stepped out, her jacket whipping in the wind, hair lashing across her face. For a moment they stood in silence, side by side against the storm, the world erased around them. She didn't look at him, only out into the swirling dark. "You were Marine," she said, not a question, not a guess, a statement carved into the storm. He didn't answer. "I had a brother," she continued. "Same ink, same eyes. Buried overseas. They sent me a folded flag. You know what that feels like." The wind screamed between them. He closed his eyes. Yes, he knew. He had been the one to carry flags back, to press them into hands trembling with loss. He knew what it felt like to see the hole it left behind. She didn't push. She just stood there, watching the dust whip between them, her own silence almost as heavy as his. Then the sound came, not the storm, not the wind. A distant rumble of engines, faint but growing. Headlights cut through the blackness in the distance, swallowed and reappearing like ghosts in the storm. More bikers. Not hers. He tensed, instinct moving faster than thought. She noticed. "You know them?" He shook his head once. "Don't need to." The engines grew louder, closer, circling the bar like wolves finding scent. Her men inside shouted, scrambling to the windows, guns drawn in case. The storm had trapped them, boxed them in with strangers rolling in under cover of dust. And that's when she saw it. The faint shimmer of sweat at his temple, the way his hand flexed near his side, as though it remembered a rifle that wasn't there. He wasn't just a man with a tattoo. He was a man carrying ghosts that refused to stay buried. She put a hand on his arm, firm, grounding. "Stay close," she said. It wasn't a command. It was an offering. Inside, glass shattered. Shouts turned sharp. The storm outside roared louder, and the engines stopped just beyond sight, rumbling low like thunder waiting to strike. He looked back toward the bar, then at her. Her men were her blood. His daughter was his. The weight of choice pressed heavy on him. He pulled something from his pocket, a crumpled piece of paper, edges worn soft. The wind almost snatched it away, but she caught a glimpse before he closed his fist tight again. A child's drawing. A stick figure with a smile, holding hands with another bigger figure in uniform. Above it, written in messy letters, "Come home, Daddy." The storm swallowed her breath.
She didn't speak.
She only understood. He looked at her for the first time, truly looked, and in his eyes was the war he never left, the daughter waiting, and the line he refused to cross unless he had no other choice. Engines roared again. Shadows moved through the storm. The night was no longer about the past. It was about what would happen next. The engines outside grew restless, circling like wolves that smelled blood. Their rumble bled into the storm, a rhythm of menace that made the walls of the bar tremble. Inside, the bikers pressed themselves against windows fogged with dust, weapons drawn, breaths sharp. The storm had swallowed the world, but shadows moved within it, headlights slicing through grit and smoke, appearing and vanishing like ghosts. He stood at the door, shoulders rigid, shirt torn wide to the air. The marine tattoo glistened with sweat and dust, a brand that pulled silence out of men. His hand pressed against the splintered frame as though steadying not just himself, but the whole bar. Behind him, the woman's voice was quiet, steady. "They're not here to drink." No one answered. They didn't need to. Everyone in the room felt it, the weight of something about to break. The first shot cracked like lightning. A window shattered, spraying glass. Men ducked, shouted, returned fire into the storm where shadows twisted. The jukebox, silent for so long, sparked as a stray round cut its wire, plunging the room into near darkness. Muzzle flashes painted the walls red and white, a broken rhythm of war. He didn't move at first. He stood in that doorway, the storm tearing at him, his chest heaving. He could hear the cries of years past in every gunshot. The battlefield had never left him, it had only changed shape. His fists curled, knuckles cracking against memory. A scream cut through the noise. One of her men dragged down near the door, blood slicking the floor. Instinct roared to life. He tore forward, not for glory, not for anger, but because he had spent his life pulling men from fire, and the muscle remembered even when the heart wished to forget. He grabbed the wounded man by the vest, hauled him clear of the door, his own body shielding him as bullets chewed the frame. The woman moved too. She was no queen on a throne. She was in the dirt with her people, shoving weapons into hands, steadying the wounded, her hair whipping free of its bandana. She caught his eyes for one flicker in the chaos. No words, just a nod. Recognition. The storm outside swallowed everything, but inside the fight raged like a furnace. He moved through it with a kind of brutal grace, fists where there should have been rifles, broken bottles turned to knives, every strike short, efficient, born of a man who had lived in blood before. Dust clung to his sweat, turning him into a shadow of iron. Then came the breach. The door gave way under a boot, splintering inward. Shapes surged through, guns up, faces hidden in masks of storm. The bar became a battlefield. He met them head-on. The first went down with a broken jaw, the second slammed into a table that cracked under his weight. Gunfire deafened, smoke choked, but he kept moving, every strike a memory of brothers lost, every breath a fight against the part of him that wanted to let go and vanish back into war. One of the masked men raised a pistol toward the woman. Time slowed. He saw her eyes widen, saw the barrel lift. His body moved before thought, shoulders smashing into hers, pulling her clear as the shot ripped past. His shirt tore wider in the motion, the marine tattoo bared to all. Her hand steadied him when he staggered, her voice in his ear. "Stay with me." The storm screamed louder, glass shattering, bottles exploding. The room was fire and thunder. Somewhere in the madness, the crumpled paper slipped from his pocket, skidding across the floor until her boot pinned it. She bent, almost without thought, and lifted it. The drawing. The words scrawled by a child's hand. "Come home, Daddy." She froze, her chest burning with something sharper than fear. When she looked up, the man before her wasn't just a soldier or a stranger. He was a father clinging to the last thread of light he had left. And she made her choice. She tore a shotgun from the hands of one of her fallen men, cocked it with a snap that silenced even the storm, and stood shoulder to shoulder with him. For the first time, they fought as one. The battle dragged on in blur and blood. When the last of the intruders fell into the storm outside, silence pressed against the bar, broken only by the labored breathing of the survivors. Smoke curled to the ceiling, bullets lodged in wood, blood seeping into dust. He stood in the wreckage, chest heaving, shirt torn to rags, tattoo burning through grime. His fists dripped red. For a moment, he wasn't in the bar. He was back where the war had ended, staring at the bodies of friends who didn't come home. His breath caught, eyes burning. A hand touched his arm. Gentle, grounding. Her hand. She stood beside him, hair wild, face streaked with grit, her eyes locked on his. Not pity. Not triumph. Something quieter. Understanding. She held up the drawing. Her voice was low, almost lost in the wind. "She's waiting for you." He looked at the paper, then at her. His jaw clenched. His body wanted to collapse, but something inside held him upright. He reached out, took the paper back, folded it slow and careful like it was made of glass. Her men began to gather the wounded. The storm outside was breaking, light bleeding slowly through the grit. The engines that had roared in menace were gone, scattered back into the desert. She turned to him. "I could buy you safety. Money. A way out." He shook his head. His voice came rough, the first words he had spoken since the storm began. "I've got what I need." And he walked toward the door, each step heavy but certain. The dawn outside was pale, fragile, but it was there. Through it, he imagined his daughter's small hand in his, her voice calling him home. That was all the wealth he wanted. He pushed the door open and stepped into the light. The storm was gone, leaving the air sharp and clean, the desert stretching wide. His back was straight, his scars uncovered, his silence intact. She stayed behind, watching him go. For the first time in years, she didn't feel untouchable. She felt human. And in that silence, she knew she was changed. The bar would rebuild. The dead would be buried. The scars would remain. But the image of that man, carrying nothing but a torn shirt, a tattoo, and a child's drawing into the dawn, would haunt her long after. And perhaps heal her too.